Right, so one thing, I want to transition to the obvious other team to talk about from the last four finals, because they just were the ones that eliminated Heroic, and it has to be Astralis. Because coming in, I'll put all my cards on the table. In fact, luckily, because I do all this work, it's already on bloody YouTube. I can't delete it at this point in time. I could, but what the fucking point be? I've been wrong a million times. So in almost as notorious fashion as that time, I did actually pick, incorrectly, the winner of all 7 playoff matchups at E-League Season 2, therefore going 0-7, which did spawn that amazing meme where someone did like the James Bond, but it was just me as the 0-7 or whatever. And that was like, that was the meme. But sometimes the internet has a good meme. Basically, I did come into the match when Astralis was playing, and I gave all these reasons as to why there's no way this Astralis would be good. Not like, I was like, Blame F's never even not even been in IGL before. Obviously, Config had a broken wrist. He might not even be good anymore. Who knows? Like, Zipnix just wanted the bag. Glaive, he hasn't even played with players like this. It's a different type of team. And Ave, he's just a cheater and he has to adapt to CSGO. And then, of course, they just looked amazing in like those first couple of games. So that's all out the window apparently. But that's the question. That's where I want to start now. Is it all out the window? Like, did this performance, has this like made you, are you like a true believer in this Astralis team now? Is the potential all there? Are you all in on them? Are you going all in?
I actually thought they were very promising this tournament, especially considering, talking to Blame F before they even started their tournament runs, he said that they had 11 days of practice coming into it. And I think for a team like Astralis, who were previously very tactical, and Blame F himself, who does a lot of the legwork and does a lot of the research, I think this team has so much potential to get even better as they go. So seeing them perform like this at an event where they haven't had that much time to actually get their own strategies sort of implemented and really fleshed out, I think that showed a lot of promise. I think Glaive even said in a stage interview before one of their matches that he felt that they were individually playing very well this tournament, but tactically they could have a lot more depth.
Oh, yes.
And I actually 100% believe that, because you could see in some situations in the game that they had rounds where they just didn't have the adaptations and the, a lot of stuff that would be pre-planned reactions to certain situations that Astralis were very good at sort of reading into previously. You could tell that those were sort of being called on the fly, or were being sort of still a little bit shaky in terms of how quickly they were reacting to it. And that's just because they are a relatively new lineup in terms of the 5-man players. So I think this gave us a very early indicator of the potential for the team, just because you saw how well Config was playing, and that whole storyline that people had of whether he can come in and recover from his injury coming into this event. That
one seems pretty conclusively proven.
Yeah, he disproved every single person with this immediately off the bat. I think he had some absurd 30 kill performance in his first map, and then another 30 kills or close to it in the second. So he disproved that. I think for me, what's the reason I'm so in on this team is that Glaive, towards at least the end of the last Astralis lineup, when he stepped back from in-game leading a little bit as well, a lot of the work going into matches was put on him and Zonic in terms of the preparation and the sort of demo work and whatnot. And Blame F even told me in the interviews that he is trying to sort of fill that gap so that Glaive, and take some of the pressure off of Glaive's shoulders. So a lot of the demo work is Glaive is obviously still doing it, and Blame F is trying not to sort of overlap and get in the way of that. But what he is doing is, when they're going into a practice, Blame F is basically giving him like a Google Doc, or giving him like a bunch of ideas and he's basically saying, take it if you want to, don't take it if you want to. Here are all of these ideas that I have seen or I can bring to the table, and it just gives them a deeper playbook over time. I think they haven't necessarily implemented it yet, but having somebody else to be able to do a lot of that legwork, and someone like Blame F who watches a lot of the demos, I think that just adds so much to this lineup that already had a lot of tactical depth in previous iterations. So I think going forward, this team will be a pretty serious competitor next year.
I really like to hear that as well. I think obviously there was a lot of things to be skeptical about for this new Astralis lineup, but one of the biggest things for me was, is Blame F going to want to relinquish that control that we know he had in Complexity, right? Like, is he going to be coming in, and is Glaive going to be going, actually, you know what, I enjoyed that time where I wasn't being a game leader, you can take it on. How is that going to be working? But that's actually really cool to hear that thus far, it sounds like they found something that works for the both of them. Obviously, I hope that continues in the future as well. And that actually makes a lot of sense in terms of why Mirage is now integrated into that pool, right? Like, I was really excited to see that, and it makes total sense with BlameF and Config. I think for me, they're kind of the two recently most synonymous players with that map, right? Just Config, it doesn't matter whether he's T-side, CT side, just super aggro down mid. And that was kind of something I was maybe a bit worried about coming onto Astralis, going, is he going to get to play that map anymore? So it's good to hear that. And I think that just embracing of both sides seems to be working quite well. And I like that you brought up the Glaive point as well, because I think a point that we were making on the desk is that he's super self-aware as a player. And we literally done this whole 15, 20-minute segment, and then he did that interview on stage, which was like, yeah, that's exactly what we were saying. Is there going to be that tactical depth going forward? Is that something that they're aware of and are kind of working towards getting back to that notorious Astralis level? And he literally said that on the stage. He's like, yep, we know this is a weakness, and this is what we're going to be working on going forward. To counter that, I am still questioning him AWPing long term, because some of the stuff he was doing is, it was super explosive. Like, I think he ended, I didn't look at the stats when the tournament ended, but up until their game against Vitality, he had the most opening kills of anybody at the entire event, which was super impressive to be going into that new role and being that explosive with it as well, making so much space. I just wonder what's going to happen when people have seen that, and whether he has that kind of skill, that kind of depth as an AWPer to then counter that, right? When people are having reads and people know his tendencies. I think, possibly because he's such a star player, right, that he will be aware that that's going to happen. It's just a reaction from that. And I don't think we're going to see that, at this next event. I think that's going to be over the course of a few months that people will start to kind of get more of a read on that. But yeah, that was kind of, I was really glad to see that he was coming out and trying just, obviously totally new role, totally new style as well. I don't know, it's just kind of amazing that he's one of the best England leaders in CSGO history. And that's not enough for him. No, he wants to become an AWPer as well now. Like, I think that's just super cool, like, about his character.
I mean, that's the problem I had though, dude. Is like, I don't know that I believe that that's like a real thing that can, like, here's the problem as well. They also like carefully in the interviews set up the idea that like Lockie himself volunteered, like, oh, maybe I could just not be, because obviously he's just fucking Morty from Rick and Morty as far as I'm concerned. Like, oh, gee, I don't know, Glaive, maybe you could just stop a little bit this time. Like, we're supposed to believe that he said this, right? And then Glaive was like, oh, I guess I will then, young buck. Like, no, in that scenario, I'll tell you right now, whether this happened or not, it's real, because it's just true. As in spirit, what I'm saying. This just looked to me like Glaive is such a winner and a gangster that he was like, look, this is the team I have to take to this tournament. Let's not address why I don't have Bobski and why I have Lockie. Like, this is just who I have to play with at this tournament. I want to win this tournament if I can. So logically, what could I do to make it work? Well, at the moment, he's struggling as a primary AWPer. So I'll just do it on a bunch of CT sides and we'll see how it goes. And guess what? As you said, it looked fucking amazing. The problem is that, like, look, I'll put it this way. If he really can just do this for the next events and for month after month, and let's say in 6 months he's still the AWPer, then look, he is just one of the greatest players ever, and he's redefined Counter-Strike and broken the game, blah blah blah. I just feel like this was like a flash in the pan. Like, I don't think even he tries to AWP this much in future tournaments. I think you'll have games where it doesn't work and he goes, right, let's try something else. Like, pragmatically, I can't just do this over and over again, because as I say, like, it would be the most unique like role swap ever in history. Because think about it, one of the things people typically actually criticize Cadian about in Heroic is his individual AWPing isn't that sick, but normally you give him a pass because he's also the IGL and he's doing a good job as the IGL. The idea we're just going to say Glaive can really do everything. Look, I know he's a pretty sick IGL, but like, he's not fucking superhuman. He's just a human being at the end. So I don't know if because you nailed it there as well. It wasn't just that he was getting AWP kills. He was literally on CT side of Nuke and Mirage, going to the standard AWP spots and just always getting the first kill no matter who he was facing. Like, that just feels impossible to replicate. I know I sound like a hater by saying that, but that's the one element I've got to believe comes down when they play. What do you think, North?
I mean, I'm glad you brought up Cadian, because I actually asked him about Glaive AWPing. Like, I asked him what his thoughts were on Glaive AWPing, and he said that just because Glaive is such a smart individual player, and because he knows what he's doing all the time, like, his decisions are very, he's very firm and final in his decisions, and that's something that you sort of need as an AWPer. Like, you need to be very conscious and very committed to what your choices are and what duels you're taking and whatnot. And that's something that Glaive has always been very strong on. So essentially what Cadian was saying is that it's for Glaive to come in and pick up this role. He can be very impactful in it initially because of how he's always played the game and the fact that he's so firm in his decisions. The problem is that once you start playing as an opper, a lot of teams will start trying to counter you and read into you. And that's one of the main roles that will get counter-stratted in terms of like where you're playing and positioning. And as smart as Glaive is with it, the true test will be whether he can even get close to maintaining this level over time, because now a lot of the teams will look at their tapes and their demos and try and counter how he's playing. And also, like, to keep in mind, they had no game tape coming into this event,
it's nothing.
Right? So nobody could actually,
yeah,
exactly. Nobody could actually tell what Glaive's style would be approaching this. So I think, yes, he can play the role. I just don't think he can play at like a top 5 level consistently in terms of being able to keep Astralis and bring them further elevate them over the course of time. And to your point, I think you might have mentioned it on a podcast, or maybe Mally Snake mentioned it, but it doesn't make sense for Glaive to be in this role when they have Lucky. Like, there's no reason that Lucky should continue to be on the team if they're going to have Glaive opping.
Oh, of course.
That's not to say that I think Lucky's rifling actually did impress me this tournament. He had far more impact than I thought he would in terms of some of the multi-frag rounds that he had, especially on A-Site Mirage. He was getting a lot of multi-kills and living way longer than I thought he would in a lot of situations. But yeah, I think if there's so many other riflers you could bring in that would have way more impact at a top level, especially in the Danish scene, like the amount of talent depth is incredible. So if they're truly going to have Glaive opping long term, surely they would be able to find another player to bring up their firepower a little bit, or more experienced even. But yeah, I think I would rather see them find another top opper to fill that spot, because if they want to compete against a team like a Vitality next year, or even actually dethrone Na'Vi, I don't think this specific roster composition will be able to do it, even though they did really impress me this tournament.
I'll go one further. I'll say this. Since they themselves are at this IEM winter tournament, so obviously they're also playing immediately another LAN tournament, and it's not a crowd one. First of all, there's going to be no shenanigans. There's no crowd to help them, or I would say, more importantly, hurt the opponent. I don't think it necessarily helped them as much. It just felt like it sort of got in the heads of specifically Heroic. It was mainly just that one match that seemed to affect. I would say this. I actually think this is the tournament where they have the correction, because one of the problems I had with Astralis at this tournament was they also were doing way too much of it on CT sides. It reminded me of Nip at the major. And it's like, that just doesn't last. Like, you can do that, by the way, if individually players play well. Obviously, people can just stand at their spot and kill 2 or 3 people when they come to there. But like, realistically, you haven't had any extra time to like rejig your T side. So that's coming in as bad as was before. And now there are demos people can watch. And on top of that, are you really going to have these performances from Glaive, etc.? The other players I can accept, like, let's be real, like Blame F and Config can do these things again. Config, maybe it was a little bit of his upper reach. Like, that was probably like peak era Config. But even so, he looked very comfortable in the game. It wasn't like he was like strained to do with this. He's just a fucking baller, isn't he? So I think they've got, like, what's cool is they've got the firepower. I still think the Lucky thing has to be resolved at some point. The problem with that is it's like every discussion about the Astralis org. There's always a little bit of fuckery shaded in of what the org machinations are. Like, who knows really what their end game is? Is it to flip him in 6 months? Is it that they hope he has a little spike and then they trade him off somewhere? Is he really a player? You can't really know. But if you just look in the server, he does look like he's a little bit out of place right now, especially obviously he's not doing his main role. He's not the main AWPer. So I personally think this is probably the tournament already where they error correct a little bit. But the good news is, as we were talking about before, because they haven't actually had very much time and they're themselves bedding in a new coach, the upside is it doesn't matter if some of the advantages now go down. They can obviously rebuild a whole new system with these new players, figure it out, and they could be way better in a month from now. So I think there's a bit of like, it's like a push and pull. They'll lose a bit now, but they get it back in the future when they've had the few weeks of a boot camp. I'll even address that point you said earlier as well about the fact that like Glaive himself in an interview essentially was willing to admit, like, tactically, by the way, literally my shit, like that, like we're not that good right now. Because here's one thing you'll notice: the really great in-game leaders, part of what makes them great is to actually assess what your issues are and what's going on in the game. You have to be very realistic and pragmatic. You can't just be like some of the players I referred to earlier who want to dream like, oh, I'm just going to give an epic speech and then tell them that, you know, we can all do it and fight to the end and that's what's going to win every game. No, sometimes people like Glaive and Carrigan, they'll just straight up tell you their troops sort of the expectation, like, look, actually, we're not supposed to win this game. We're actually the underdog. You know what? This map, they're probably going to pick the favorite. But the idea is you just give people the real. Like, the idea is they know you might have a real approach you can take to win the game, but you don't have to blow smoke up their arse and make a fantasy world that you're always the better team. I think it's almost to me a sign of security and how good you actually are as an IGL, that you know that you can sort of tell people, look, we're not at our best right now. You don't have to always pretend you're at a 10 out of a 10, as it were, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And particularly, I mean, maybe aside from Lucky, because I don't know him that well, as a personality, just the people that he's surrounded by now, right? Like, I'm sure Config coming into this wasn't expecting that he was going to have the monster numbers that he had, but he's a confident guy, so he's going to try his best, right? And I think maybe that's what gives me a little bit of hope if we do see that Glaive role switch out, of him not being the AWP anymore, or if we do see people start to counter it. I think the other puzzle pieces that they have going forward do fill me with hope. It's not like Glaive was, single-handedly carrying that, not at all. So I think even if they do have to have that kind of switch up, the other players behind him, and what you said, Note, about the tactical side of it and how they're already developing that and already sort of trying to innovate, I think that will set them in good stead going forward, even if we do see that being a little bit turbulent in terms of some of the results. I think we are going to see good stuff from them going forward.
I think just one final point on Lucky for me is, to me, this just feels like a lose-lose situation for him, because, as I said, his rifling was actually pretty decent this tournament. And with the player, as you're saying, with the players he's surrounded with, the sort of experience and the amount of help he'll get to improve that over time is actually going to be really beneficial. And his rifling could get exponentially better over time. The issue is that I don't think that they break through like a team like Na'Vi or Vitality next year without a top level opper. Yes. So no matter how good Lucky gets, they will eventually have to, I think, make a change for a top level opper. And that's where it really sucks to be Lucky in this situation, I think.
There's not enough time for him to really level up like people want him to, unless he was going to hit the ground running like some of these amazing rookies. If this is going to take, let's be realistic, a realistic time for it would be like 6 to 9 months. You've got to get a lot of lands, you've got to play with all these teammates a lot. The problem is, I get the vibe, everyone else in the team is like, we either were just winning, or if you're blaming Config, you just joined to win. Like, you're not waiting a year to get your chance. Like, it's like, we want to win today. Like, it's the whole reason we made this team. So I feel like I said, the only reason, in my opinion, the whole Lucky thing exists on the table is because of whatever the org's doing and whatever they want to do with this player. I think if you ask the players tomorrow, like gun to their head or like truth serum moment, they just say, of course, we just want like go get like Farling or something. They would just say, go get someone proven. And because the real weird thing about this team is, as much as you can shade it, like, look, they are winning even with the issues they've had with this player. The problem is, if you replace, like, let's be real, if I could wave a magic wand and tomorrow Device just walks in and takes Lucky's spot, everyone in the whole room gets like 20 times happy and they think they could win the major tomorrow. Like, this team would look amazing then, wouldn't it? There's the difference. There's one thing for someone to be not that bad and for someone to be amazing. The gap between those two is enormous.
Sponge found a really interesting quote that I think we brought up on the first day they were in the arena, of Glaive literally saying in August, so like 4 or 5 months ago, saying, we're not going to be a top level team, we're not going to be back at number one without a top level AWPer. And cut to, he's now AWPing.
Okay,
well, I just thought
that's like the Curb Your Enthusiasm music plays after that, like, And then the joke is it's just him, he's just the AWPer now, and it's like, well, I better do it myself then.
But it's like kind of interesting to see, like, we talk about him being self-aware, and then it's just like, well, obviously, like, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but like, does he really not view Lucky as being that
it's
level,
a bit awkward, right?
Like, how much faith, how much faith do you have in like a player that you still have on your team? You're not switching him out for anybody else, to kind of take that role away from him.
Note, as a journalist, look, we have to be cynical at times. We have to know, like, look, this is PR and stuff. Let me ask you this, right? As an outsider, I don't know what like level of connections you have, what info you know about Astralis, so I won't take any of this. All I want to know is this, right? If I asked you, like, as a bet now, you just give me your perspective. Does Lucky in a year from now, is he in Astralis?
I mean, according to Casper, they're not making any changes.
Okay. Yes, indeed. I saw that. I saw that interview. Yes, exactly. Okay, right. Well, that's the official word then, isn't it? So what's your perspective, though? That's what I want to know.
I think that if they want to compete for the number one spot and win majors, then yes, they have to make a change. Right. And I think that if that is their goal, and that is, I don't think Blame F, Config, Glaive are going to be satisfied with not trying to do that. So I think, yes, they make a change.
See, I think it's easy. They just build out 4 more players. They make the 10-man lineup, and as long as one of them's a good AWP, no problem, right? See, what I've done is use their own PR against them there. I haven't really. And by the way, the one story that obviously I understand why people don't mention it, because people just know that at this point in time, for whatever reason Astralis has done it, they're just not going to play Bobski. But the real shame is that's also why it's a lose-lose for Lucky Note. If this was the only 5-man set of players in Astralis, you'd have no choice but to go, right, either you're not going to AWP, in which case we'll work with you as a rifler, or you've got to be a good AWPer. His big problem is this: the second he puts that AWP down, and God forbid, by the way, someone like Glaive actually does a good job with it, then the question becomes, well, why don't we just kick you out for Bobski? Then he's a really good rifler. So I feel like, yeah, he's in the worst spot possible. Because I think as an AWPer, you're already in actually arguably the worst spot in the game. You're trying to, as a rookie, AWP on LAN in stadiums at tier 1 against the best teams in the world. Like, that's like the most unfit, like no one would want that task essentially unless you're really the best player. Or in this scenario, again, people are just going to say, why are you here if you're not AWPing though? So you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you can't. Don't if you're lucky. I don't really know what way he has out of it, aside from just get 3 times better or something.
I think there's only 2 players I've seen who can come in with that sort of pressure on them and perform at the top level, and it's ZywOo and Bit. Those are the only players I've actually seen who've come out of the abyss and just done that straight off the bat without needing multiple years to get into the feel of playing at a top stage level.
Thing is though, dude, they've ruined it for everyone else, because now people are like, why don't you just do it like that? No one can! You're the way all like the greatest players ever couldn't do that either. What are you talking about? It's the other way around. What you really should ask, literally, it's like what I always used to say this about ZywOo. You shouldn't ask, will Shiro be the next ZywOo? You should say, how the fuck did ZywOo do it? Like, it still doesn't make sense that that player did it, hit the ground and was just the best immediately. So no, I'd say the same thing with the Bit one. Like, he is such an outlier, he shouldn't even be included in discussions about rookies. It's just unfair, isn't it?
Yes.
Like, no one can do that. And also, by the way, it definitely helps when you've got like simple electronic fucking, like, he's got pretty banging line. There's another thing. It's not like they just chucked him on fucking Forza and then just sent them to the major. Like, carry the whole thing now on LAN. Like, you know, yeah, he has a bit of help. He has like a pretty good team around him, hasn't he? I know.
He also has like one of the best coaches that could possibly help you develop behind him.
Yes. There's another angle, but I hadn't even thought of that angle. Dude, that's the craziest angle for the Locky story. I guess for once I'm actually going to be a Locky apologist, because I'll say this as well. Think how hard this is. Not only are you literally, I think that would on paper have been his second real LAN ever, if you're thinking about like LANs of like teams that we care about. Not only are you at your second LAN, you don't even have the same fucking coaches from the first LAN. You've now changed to a completely new coach, who, by the way, isn't even like a super tenured CSGO coach, so like no one even knows where Abe's system's going to be or what his approach is going to be. So actually, this must have been an incredibly hard set of circumstances for Locky to be in.
Yeah, I think that just nailed it on his head. I think him coming into this, I even asked him about playing with Dupree and Magis, and he basically said that, yeah, they taught me a lot, but having BlameF and Config come in is like a breath of fresh air. I didn't ask him specifically about the Zonic Ave bit, but I think that's just a good point in the sense that having a coach who does not have the same level, not even close to the same level of experience as Zonic in terms of the top level stage, in CSGO, that is. I think that just sucks for him, because every situation I see for him is just a lose-lose, unfortunately.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.